We at last got away from that downward Lower East Side spiral by taking Pitt Street to 304 Rivington, where the Hammer family moved after their initial success in the young century, where another housing project rises from the site. Then we went up a block and west a couple on Houston, and instead of immediately north on Avenue A, we stopped across A at that intersection's northwest corner. Evidently liking to snicker, Hank did it again while leaning his bike on the wall. He said, "Take a breather, our 5th stop." I wondered if riding all day made him immune. I said, "At this rate, we're out all night." He said, "Don't put up with it. We can angle toward your place now." I said, "That's okay, but you intend to stay out all night?" "Absolutely." So to keep up, I gave him something to chew on. "I'm fine. What are we saying bye to here?" She wasn't a what. She was a she, every eye on the street focused on jaywalking from the Mecca restaurant diagonally straight toward us across Avenue A. She seemed to float in her flowery print dress, so I looked for sneakers, she was moving so smoothly. Her afro's softness and dark brown skin radiated a pleasant texture that emphasized her near flawlessness. We would have been floored by her missing smile. So pleasing was the sight of this beautiful woman, I thought the first words had to be hers since we were in speechless awe. But when she was in range, Hank said, "Oops," and she contorted her face, stepping on the curb. She said, "Hank, tough, not rough, and I thought you weren't coming back." Hank shrugged at me as if I brought him. Then, oops, again when she retreated back to the restaurant past a bigger than both of us African-American male who crossed without looking at traffic that stopped just for him. Then the man stayed in the street while Hank on the curb was almost to his shoulders. The man said, "This is the last time I will just tell you to stop bothering Terry." No one could mistake the moment for peaceful. But Hank tried looking him in the eye. The man didn't buy it and put his clenched fist in Hank's face, and Greenway gulped motionless while I was afraid. But Hank said, "There's nothing I wouldn't do for you out of respect for her, but you walk all over people. And you heard me, no discussion, go." Then he faced me. "You two should get. That's my business, and I already called the police on this nuisance and his accomplice." I didn't think much of Hank's foil, but there was obviously trouble here. But the larger man abruptly left, certain his booming, "Find another life," was heard even from behind his back. To me, Hank said, "He thinks he owns her." But despite the discomfort, seeing her seemed important to him. I even felt we'd accomplished something riding up A to 7th Street and Tompkins Square Park, where Hank pointed out the Congressman Samuel S. Cox statue under the corner tree. He said my excuse for coming this way was to honor this pedestaled figure. Blew me away when I first read the inscription. This gallantly portrayed statue represents a political moment for the common man. Congressman Cox was instrumental in passing early labor laws that benefited the federal government's 19th century letter carriers. Eventually, that progress filtered through the rest of society. The 8-hour post office day led civilization further away from a form of indentured slavery. The congressman was instrumental in the 5-day work week and 2-week vacations. Not mentioned on the statue, of course, is the initial measures came about before a laborers' union could position itself to share credit. There are always reasons behind congressional votes. Yes, Mr. Trainer, I know unions became an extra business, but that aside, the statue means to me we're all responsible for the circles Congress runs us in. Because when only simple explanations suffice, the whole truth is merely an advertising slogan. I thought, why bother? This is his night for amusing himself. We propped the bikes on the construction fence still up from the park riot 2 summers before. Hank had rode by on the beast side and got the hell away from it just before it exploded. Animated with his hands, he said, "A cop flagged me down and was told by walkie-talkie by superiors to pull me in. I explained I can't go to protests, my shoulder separates, and he let me go." Right? Now both shoulders easily separate. Just as a standoff, that riot was a mess. The park was full of screaming, surrounded by cops. The world was shaking on this tiny piece of it. Controlling the public is a necessary evil, but officers have to not use deranged force as they did after I left. Both sides apparently let everything escalate. "Anyway," Hank said, "I thought this statue was awkwardly out of place when I first came across it, camouflaged here by this tree. But it turns out there's revealing coincidences. The congressman faces directly across 7th Street, at exactly where Kerouac and Ginsberg walking by had their simultaneous epiphany of a more cooperative future understanding. Imagine that. Before I found out about the Beats elevated moment of consciousness in a guidebook, I often felt philosophical here at this spot, thanks to the congressman. The statue feels placed out of the way, and in fact I found in the library that letter carriers themselves ceremoniously paid for placing this honorable image for decades where the more prominently seen Astor Place cube presently stands. Eventually everyone walks through Astor Place, but Cox, the letter carrier's friend, was cast off here long before the cube arrived. A possible visible result of America's ideological fit over the labor struggle. Can you feel the tragedy of removing the congressman from near Broadway's pizzazz over the wrong side of the working man versus entrepreneur issue? I asked him, moved when? He said 52. So before Hanks could, I said, sounds right on the timeline. Why remain ineffectual at getting the political comedian to shut up? I said, but they were communists, Hank. Overreaction was a natural instinct. Hank said, no doubt. But the statue does symbolize for me how easy it's been to discard the laboring class. All that noise, and we reached the pinnacle where so many receive a taste now, yet there's no rest from the burden of self-support. All over this great land, our children are threatened with less rewarding lies if they don't achieve the status that separates them from the dime a dozen that are easily replaced and so generously allowed to function among us. He had no idea my eyes rolled. Looking at the congressman, Hank said, presumably labor unions have a cause to fight. Originally founded to represent worker dignity, but absorbed by the system, labor leaders primarily function as expensive wholesalers who hire lawyers to arbitrate with other lawyers, hindering the workers' financial climb up the ladder. It's obvious the economic steps are broken or too expensive to fix. Yesteryear's fight for 4 figures becomes last year's struggle for 5. That is this year's need for 6 that runs concurrently with the pervasive desire everyone has for 7 figures. Everyone wants the labor leaders' opportunity to not have to actually labor themselves, with their feet on a desk if they have to get the job done. Then Hank looked at me and continued, we all dream of living far beyond the paltry lives wages provide. But alive, Congressman Cox's statue might believe with me, looking at today's results, a beautiful mess. Someone from nearby Gigglers said, tell him, white boy. Hank laughed and spoke deliberately slow. This is the crux of the American way. Our guaranteed right is the opportunity to pursue personal wealth. Beautiful. plus desperation's clawing got us to idolize working your ass off. Fine. But worked off on our parents' backs in a more subtly packaged aristocratic tradition, tied beautifully in a bow of less ostentatious, upperly mobile ribbon.